Let's begin with some prayers. You can try to repeat.
Should I do some introduction? Yes, there are some new people.
Sure.
Hare Krishna. Sorry, I was out. So much for coming today. know, it is a working day, but still, you guys are able to come here to participate in this program. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming. We have a very special guest today. His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. He's a monk, he's a speaker, he's been practicing Krishna consciousness or bhakti-yoga for 25 years. He's traveling from Mumbai, India. He is an invited speaker to TEDx, Google, Microsoft, Intel, UNESCO, World Health Organization. There are so many elite organizations where Prabhu is invited to speak. And those who attended yesterday, they should not answer this question, but can you guess how many lectures or presentations Prabhu gives in a year? Can you take a guess? Wild guess. Not for the people who attended yesterday.
365.
Haribo! You are very close. But Prabhu gives more than 400 classes in a year, 100 cities across 4 continents every year. So Prabhu travels, all across the world to spread this presentations and Krishna consciousness. We are very, very fortunate to have Chaitanya Charan Prabhu with us. Out of his busy schedules, he is coming to Columbus every year to give this knowledge to us. So let's give a big round of applause and join me in welcoming Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for coming today. So we'll begin with some prayers. You can try to repeat after me. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Krupa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So how many of you are coming for the first time to a program like this? Okay. First time, okay. And okay. Yeah, of course, this program, everyone is coming for the first time. This program is happening for the first time, in one sense. Yeah, thank you. So, how many of you have, never attended any other program, any spiritual program, any Krishna conscious program before? Anyone? Okay, everybody has. Okay, let me stop this.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay. So, today we will discuss broadly on the topic of the key to happiness. We all want happiness, but happiness is often very elusive. It just seems to be there and then it leaves us. So why does that happen? We'll discuss this based on this verse from the Bhagavad Gita and some stories from the Mahabharata which illustrate the principle. So let's try to recite this verse. So this is, I'll tell the meaning and then we'll try to recite it. So, Krishna is saying, this is 1837 in the Bhagavad Gita, Yad Tad, that which, Agre Visham Iva, that which in the beginning is like poison. So you can repeat, Yad Tad Agre Visham Iva, Pariname, in the result, Amrutopamam, Amrut is like nectar. So that which is like poison in the beginning will turn out to be like nectar in the end. Pariname amritopamam. Tat sukham, that happiness. Satvikam proktam. Krishna says this is elevated happiness, this is enlightened happiness. This is a good kind of happiness. Tat sukham satvikam proktam. Atma buddhi. Atma means self. Buddhi is intelligence. This happiness makes us more aware of ourselves. It grants us greater self-understanding. And prasadajam, that is the result of it. That is, you could say, we get happiness, but as a byproduct, as a consequent, as an attendant result, corollary result, we also get self-understanding. Atma buddhi prasadajam. Yattadagre vishamiva. Pariname amritopamam. Tatsukham satvikam proktam. Atma buddhi prasadajam. Yattadagre vishamiva. Pariname amritopamam. Tatsukham satvikam proktam. Atma buddhi prasadajam. Would anyone like to recite?
Yattadagre vishamiva.
Yattadagre vishamiva.
Pariname mritopamam.
Pariname amritopamam.
Tatsukam satvikam proktam.
Tatsukham satvikam proktam.
Atma buddhi prasadajam.
Atma buddhi prasadajam.
Yatatagre visham iva.
Yattadagre vishamiva.
Pariname amrutopamam.
Pariname amritopamam.
Tatsukam satvikam proktam.
Tatsukham satvikam proktam.
Atma buddhi prasadajam.
Atma buddhi prasadajam. Yattadagre vishamiva. Pariname amritopamam. Tatsukham satvikam proktam. Atma buddhi prasadajam. Yattadagre vishamiva. Pariname amritopamam. Tatsukham satvikam proktam. Atma buddhi prasadajam. Anyone else would like to try?
Yattadagre vishamiva.
Yattadagre vishamiva.
Pariname amritopamam.
Pariname amritopamam.
Tatsukam savikam proktam.
Satvikam proktam.
Atma buddhi prasadajam.
Atma buddhi prasadajam. Thank you. So this verse broadly talks about this paradoxical nature of happiness, wherein the very things that we think will provide us happiness, they often end up providing distress. And this verse is followed by the next verse, which we'll not recite, but okay. So this depicts the nature of happiness. So that which tastes like poison in the beginning, you can see the initial layer of poison, and after that there's a long nectar. That which is like poison in the beginning will be like nectar in the end. And the next verse, Krishna says in 1838, is another kind of happiness. Vishay Endriya Sanyogad Yattad Agre Amritopamam Pariname Vishamiva Tatsukham Raja Samsrutam. He says there are pleasures which seem like nectar in the beginning, but they turn out to be like poison in the end. So there are many things we could put in this category. If somebody smokes or drinks, initially they feel good. They feel great about it. But then after they have hangover, they have diseases, they get addicted. So there might be an initial level of nectar, but afterward there's a lot of poison, a lot of trouble. On the other hand, if somebody wants to become healthy and fit, they have to regulate their diet, they have to exercise. Now that is not pleasant. That's often difficult. So, one friend sent me a cartoon recently. He said, this person, he says, he used to go to a gym. He says, the gym trainer asked him, did you do your workout today? Yes. He said, yes, of course. He said, what was the workout? He said, I walked from my couch to the fridge and back 80 times. He says, why 80 times? He said, because my fridge is next to my TV and 10 times I walked to eat food, 70 times I walked to change the TV channel because my remote was not working. So it was above average workout effort. So what happens is that we try to dodge it because it's difficult. But this is the nature of the world. Now these kind of examples are a little simple to understand. But this principle that we may chase something which will actually cause us trouble, that is a universal principle. So we'll talk about this based on two stories from the Mahabharata, and we'll focus on the character of Duryodhana as contrasted with the character of Arjuna. So this is the arc of life. ARC represents three things: achievements, relationships, and consciousness. So in general, this is the priority in which we look at things. So what we seek the most, we want achievements. I want a big house, I want to get the best employee award in my company, I want to become the wealthiest person in my community. We want achievements in life. And then, okay, why do we want achievements? So that people will admire me. I also want relationships. And then, okay, consciousness. Most people don't really think much about consciousness. So it's very low down in the priority of the things that are important for us. However, if we look at life, what matters the most to us is in this hierarchy. Actually, our consciousness matters the most to us. The things around us can give us some pleasure, but the thoughts inside us can both give us far greater pleasure and far greater trouble. Even the people outside us can give us some pleasure or some trouble, but the thoughts inside us can give us far more pleasure or trouble. And if somebody recognizes this, then they'll focus on improving their consciousness, then improving their relationships, and then working at achievements. But if somebody goes the other way around, they focus on achievements, then what will happen is they are actually chasing that which is like nectar in the beginning but will be poison in the end. So let's see how this played out in the life of Yudhisthira. In the life of Duryodhana as contrasted with the Pandavas, Yudhisthira and Arjuna both. Now, when you think of Duryodhana, these are characters which are villainous. So there is a particular negative attribute associated with this character. What negative attribute comes to your mind? You think about Duryodhana? Yes? Envy. Okay, that is true. Anything else? Greedy, yes. So he was envious of whom? Pandavas. And he was greedy for what? Kingdom. So now if you see in terms of this hierarchy, what happened was his consciousness was filled with envy. And because of that, he ruined his relationship with the Pandavas. And he was consumed with the craving for the achievement. I want the kingdom. That was the craving that consumed him. And this is something which can happen in anyone's life. The character of Duryodhana may have done certain villainous activities which are extraordinarily reprehensible. But this kind of craving can happen to anyone. So let's see how this happened in Duryodhana's life. Now, when Duryodhana was growing up, at that time, he was expected to be the next king. He was the prince, heir apparent, and he was going to be the king. And Duryodhana, sometimes we think of him as a terribly foolish, wicked person. Well, that's only part of the truth. How many brothers did he have? 99. And he actually got all of them to follow him. Those of us, we try to get one sibling to follow us. It's extremely difficult. So, one of my friends gave there is this is a university in India which is very subversive. They try to portray everything from the Indian tradition negatively. So he wanted to give a talk over there. So he said, leadership lessons from Duryodhana. So we may say it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Actually, to get 99 brothers to follow, that's not an easy thing. You may say, oh, at that time the culture was such that you always followed your elders. Well, not always. He had some amount of leadership qualities. So he was expected to become the king, and suddenly the Pandavas came back. The Pandavas were living in the forest because their father passed away because of a tragic accident. They came. Now when they came, they were new in the kingdom. So yes, it's like new kids in the family. Everybody is curious. And Duryodhana, from his childhood, had an entitlement mentality. I am the prince, I deserve everything. And then suddenly he found that the attention and the affection had shifted from him to the Pandavas. And the Pandavas themselves didn't do anything to cause it. What happened was that they just knew. And so naturally everyone was attracted initially. But eventually there was a difference in the behavior. Duryodhana was, even from his childhood, he was arrogant, he was entitled. The Pandavas had lived in the forest. In the forest they had no servants to attend to their needs. They had to take care of themselves. They were lived with sages who were courteous and polite. And they also grew up to be courteous and polite. So both because of their newness and because of their gentle, refined behavior, people started getting attracted towards the Pandavas, towards Yudhisthira. So Duryodhana just couldn't bear this. It's like, suppose we are eating a delicious feast, and to savor the feast we close our eyes. And when we open our eyes, suddenly we see, we are eating it and we touch down and there's nothing over it. But look at it. Well, the feast we were eating has been moved and given to someone else. And we have nothing. What happened? So Duryodhana felt like that. I deserve this. How dare it be taken away from me? Now the Pandavas had no plan to take anything away from him. They were just who they were. But slowly from that point, his envy started. And he had that craving. I want the kingdom. So when somebody has this inverted mentality, like he starts with achievements. He said, my goal in life is to get the kingdom. And then what happens is, because of that, he started putting everyone else aside. That they are my enemies. Asau maya hata shatrur. Hanishye cha aparanapi. These are my enemies, I will destroy them. And if those people become my enemies, I will destroy them also. And in that way, he himself started sabotaging his relationships. So he placed achievement at the top priority. Now he was just a teen, and at that time, he tried to murder Bhima. He gave him poison. He invited him for a feast, and then in the feast he said, "Oh Bhima, I cooked special food for you," and they fed him the food, and that was poisoned. So now, see, anybody can feel angry. Okay, I was the center of attention. Why is my attention being taken away like this? He could feel angry, but he could have dealt with that anger. But there is a difference between anger and hate. Can anyone say what is the difference between anger and hate? Okay, in hate you want to destroy that person. In anger also sometimes, isn't it? In angry, yeah. Because in anger people can destroy his. Yes, you're getting at the truth, but there's something more over there. Yeah. Anyone else?
Anger is momentary, hate is persistent.
Anger is momentary, hate is persistent. Yeah, that's a good point. Anger is like temporary madness. We come and goes. It's fair. Anything else?
Revenge. Want to take revenge. Hate.
So hate wants to take revenge. Anger doesn't want? Yeah, it's to a lesser extent. Yes, that's true. That vengefulness, hating at the other person, there's a difference in the degree. That's what we're trying to explore. What is the difference? Anything else?
Anger is gross and hatred is
Yeah, is what? Subtle, subtle. Okay, I didn't hear that word subtle. Maybe you spoke the word subtle subtly. I didn't hear it. Okay. So, yes, anger is gross. Generally, when somebody is filled with anger, we can notice it. But if somebody is hateful, they might actually conceal the hate. So that brings us to the key difference which I wanted to focus on is anger is hot-headed. Hate is cold-blooded. Hot-headed. So it's something similar. It's temporary. It's short-lived. But so when it is hot-headed, just a person gets almost goes mad and does something. But afterward, they regret it. They try to fix things up. But hate is cold-blooded. It's manipulative. So a person sinisterly plans. When somebody gets angry, somebody will just hit the other person. But hate means the person will plan, how can I hit this person at a time when it will hurt the most? They'll plan and they will get a joy in doing it. So to understand this difference between hot-headed and cold-blooded is that anger usually knocks aside our intelligence. When we are angry, we just act unintelligently. But hate doesn't knock aside our intelligence. Hate enslaves our intelligence. That means a person who hates, they will use their intelligence very carefully to try to hurt the other person the most. So when Duryodhana tried to poison Bhima, was that due to anger or due to hate? Hate. Yes. Arranging a whole feast and then planning properly. Okay, this is the food I'll give to him, and this is what I'll do, and this is how he'll be poisoned. So it's just cold-blooded. Now we could just very easily say that, oh, this is a terrible character, and Duryodhana is a villain. And yes, that may be true. But actually, if we want to learn wisdom from these ancient stories, then it is helpful to try to understand not just what makes the good characters good, but also what makes the bad characters bad. Because when we may naturally identify with the good characters. I want to become like this. Well, that is good. But in that process, we may simply dehumanize or demonize the bad characters. I think, oh, that's such a terrible person. But those tendencies are there within us also. So if we try to understand, okay, what makes a person act like that, then by thinking of that, we can avoid fueling or fanning those tendencies within us. So we may also find in our life that we had something good going on, and then somebody else comes in our life, and when that person comes, the attention shifts to that person. And then we may feel annoyed, we may feel irritated, we may feel enraged also. It can happen even ordinarily in the family. When there's one child, the parents give all the attention to the first child. When the second child is born, then the attention shifts. And so the parents' responsibility is not just to offer affection to the first child, but to ensure that there is affection between affection second child, but also create affection between the first and second child. So it can happen in our office, it can happen in our community. We may be doing a particular service, and somebody else comes and starts doing that service better. So it may feel displaced, we feel sidelined. So in one sense, we could say that situations can explain our emotions, but situations don't excuse our actions. Situations can explain our emotions. So Duryodhana's feeling of envy is understandable. That, oh, I was having all this, suddenly it's been taken away from me. So yes, that feeling is understandable. But what he did, it can explain our emotions. It's understandable emotion. But it doesn't excuse our actions. What he did, to try to just murder him in cold blood by poisoning, that was horrendous. And that was just one of the things. And just went on and on and on. So when a person gets fixated with one particular thing, so his whole purpose in life was, I want to gain this kingdom. Now we may not be living in a world where we can become kings, but we all may have our own Kuru kingdom that we want to conquer, that we want to rule. We may have, okay, I want this kind of house, I want this kind of job, I want this kind of, this level of wealth. Now, seeking achievements is by no means a bad thing. What becomes a problem is when the priority goes wrong. When we focus on achievements at the expense of other things. And not only at the expense of other things, it's one thing to make others a lower priority. It's another to just destroy everything. So now what happened? Eventually Duryodhana, it's such that everything that he tried to do, it backfired. That he tried to poison Bhima, but through circumstances, not only Bhima survived, but he emerged stronger. Similarly, he tried to burn the Pandavas, and they escaped, and then they allied with Drupada's daughter, Draupadi. And they became powerful. They were no longer just orphan children in his family. They were the sons-in-law of a powerful rival king. He could no longer neglect them. They got half the kingdom. Then eventually, what happened was, he invited them for a gambling match. And in that, through a trick, he disposes them of everything. And then they went to the forest. They had to go. They were left penniless. The same person who had just a few months ago been enthroned as not just a king, but the emperor of the world. Yudhisthira performed the Rajasuya Yajna. Suddenly, everything was taken away from him. Now, here we see that Yudhisthira was put in a similar situation as Duryodhana was in his childhood. Although worse, in fact. See, Duryodhana, he was the heir apparent. He was the center of attention for everyone. And the Pandavas came and suddenly the attention shifted from him. Now, in one sense, Duryodhana was never the king. He was expected to become the king. So he never really had the kingdom. But it's just expectation that the kingdom was going to come to him. So everything was taken away from him. Things were not really literally taken away. They were never his. But the expectation, the entitlement that they were going to come to him, that shifted. He didn't get that. And he reacted in such a terrible way. Now, in contrast, if we consider for Yudhisthira, what happened was that he was the emperor of the world and everything was taken away from him. In that rigged gambling match, everything was taken away. Now, he could have responded with hate. He could have responded with envy. He could have responded with a destructive mentality. But he did not. See, in general, in this world, bad things happen to everyone. And we can talk about bad things at various levels. So Yudhisthira had achieved something. He had become the emperor of the world, and the achievement was taken away from him. In one moment, everything was taken away. So, what does he do? To even get a semblance of what has happened to Yudhisthira. Most of our Indians over here, say you're living in America and you build a house, you have a house, you have a career, you have family, and one day suddenly your visa is cancelled. And then you just have to leave the country. At least when we leave the country, we can go back to our home country. We have somewhere to go to. But for Yudhisthira, he just had to go out of his kingdom to the forest. He had no home country to go back to. It's a horrendous situation. But he did not react with hatred. Why? Because he was cultivating the inside-out approach to happiness. He took that exile as an opportunity to refine his consciousness. to go deeper into wisdom, to understand what really matters in life. So in one sense, both of them took opposite trajectories. And then now, Yudhisthira was in the forest, he was in poverty. Duryodhana was on the throne, he was in prosperity. You could say all of Duryodhana's dreams were fulfilled. But he was unhappy. He was dissatisfied. Why was he dissatisfied? Because envy does not provide any happiness. In fact, I saw an advertisement for a TV, it said, or it was for a car actually, it said, buy this car and enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. Now, it's okay, there might be some enjoyment, but it's a pathetic level of enjoyment. It's okay, you make others envious. But what happens? Tomorrow they might get something better than us, and then simply they will enjoy the envy in our eyes. Isn't life meant for something better? So what happens is, envy does not provide any happiness in itself. Envy requires the other's unhappiness for our happiness. It requires the other's unhappiness. Like say we may buy some new clothes. Now new clothes, if you buy that's good. If you buy new clothes and nobody notices the new clothes, nobody appreciates it, what happened? Are you people blind? It becomes like that. So quite often we are dependent on others' appreciation. That's understandable, we are social creatures. But here envy means we are dependent on the other person's unhappiness for our happiness. That's why if you consider person A and person B, say A is envious of B. So envy targets the envied, but envy torments the envious. Envy targets the envied. Duryodhana had envy which targeted Yudhisthira, but envy torments the envious. He had no peace. So he decided, let me go to the forest. And in the forest, what he decided was that I will go and parade my prosperity. And then in contrast, when Yudhisthira will see that, oh, I am in such poverty and he is in such prosperity, and Yudhisthira will be unhappy. And seeing his unhappiness will bring me great happiness. He went with that plan. So this, of course, even that plan was foiled. But the point we are making over here is that when we start thinking that achievements we want to make us happy, then achievements in themselves never provide us happiness. It is, what happens is we always need the world to appreciate our achievements. We need the world to have something less than what we have. Only then we'll be happy. So that is why Duryodhana was never happy. And at the end of it, what did he do? Finally, he decided to, after all the 12 years, 13 years happened, then the war came over. Now Krishna himself came as a peace messenger. And Krishna offered peace in the most accommodating of terms. What are Krishna's terms? Just 5 villages. It's interesting, all the 5 Pandavas were like 5 fingers of a hand, they were united. But there are 5 fingers in 5 different places. All 5 fingers are not in one. They're united, but they're not one. So they're 5 brothers, but they asked for 5 villages, not 1 village. Each of them needed their own space. So anyway, and what was Duryodhana's reply? I will not give you enough, a tip of a needle, enough territory to put even the tip of a needle through. Now when we hear this, we say, that's a nice dialogue. But if we understand it in context, it's an outrageous statement. Suppose we invite someone to come for a program and they don't want to come, so they make an excuse. Now they are making an excuse, we know that they are making an excuse, and they know that we know that they are making an excuse. But at least there is that courtesy, that politeness to try to make an excuse. But suppose we invite someone for a program and they say, even if I die, my dead body will never come to your program. Now, this is not just a no to the request. This is like a person making some request and we punch them in the nose or kick them in the face. Hey, it's far, far worse. So, Duryodhana's response was like that. Krishna was making the most accommodating proposal and say, I'll not give you enough land to put even the tip of a needle through. Now, why was he thinking like this? Because he prioritized his achievement. I want to have the kingdom at all costs. And because of that, he alienated everyone. And Krishna was his well-wisher. He alienated Krishna. Although Bhishma and Drona fought for him, but even they had no affection for him. They fought more out of obligation than affection. He alienated everyone. So, if somebody does not focus on their consciousness, they focus on achievements, what happens is, they themselves stay unhappy. Now, achievements are not a bad thing, but thinking that achievements will bring happiness, that is the mistake. Yes, we all have abilities, and we all are meant to use the abilities. And one way we can test whether we are using our God-given abilities is, what do we achieve with them? But it is not the achievement itself that brings happiness. It is the values we live by. It is the purpose that we live for. That is what brings happiness. Say, for example, we want to make money. That's necessary in life. Making money is important, but what we are making with money is even more important. What we are making with money means what kind of relationship are we cultivating? What kind of consciousness are we cultivating? So if you contrast this with Yudhisthira, Yudhisthira was in the forest. He had lost everything. But what did Yudhisthira do? He questioned the sages. He had deep philosophical discussions. He found contentment within. And how did he find contentment? We can say, he was already a saintly person. That's how he found contentment. The Mahabharata is not so simple in its narration. What the Mahabharata says is that Yudhisthira asks questions about what makes life meaningful. What is the meaning and the purpose of life? And through those questions, gradually, he started coming to peace with what had happened. Now, for Yudhisthira, he could have hated Duryodhana. He didn't do that. Another thing he could have done is he could have hated himself. I made such a terrible mistake. I had everything and I gambled and I lost everything. Now, self-hatred, when we make mistakes, if we hate ourselves, that is also toxic. Hating others is toxic, but hating ourselves is also toxic. Why is it toxic? Because if we hate ourselves, then it is we who are constantly beating ourselves down mentally. And ultimately, if we are to love God, that means we have to love all the parts of God. And among all the parts of God, we ourselves also a part of God. And in fact, we are the part of God that we are most responsible for. That we can make the most significant difference in. So if we hate ourselves, we are essentially hating a part of God. In fact, we are hating that part of God which we are meant to most care for. Most care for not in a narcissistic sense. I am great, I am everything. Who is a narcissist? Does anyone know? Narcissist is a person who is a eye specialist. Not that eye specialist, eye specialist. I first, I only, I don't care for anyone else. The word narcissism comes from the Greco-Roman mythology. There's one very handsome person, his name was Narcissus. And he always wanted to look at how handsome he was. So once he was passing by a river, and the river had swiftly flowing current. So he wanted to look at his own face. He bent down and looked at his face. And he said, oh, my face is so handsome. I have to look at my whole body. Bend down further. And people say, hey, you're bending too much. You'll fall into the river. He said, no, I'm fine. And he bent further, and he bent further. He was so desperate to look at his own form and his own beauty, that he bent so much that he fell into the river and he was swept away and he died. So it is self-obsession that leads to self-destruction. That's narcissism. We're not talking about that over here. When we say we love ourselves as a part of God, that's not narcissism. But if you understand that, if God has made us, then He still loves us. He's with us in our hearts. So we cannot hate ourselves. So Yudhisthira avoided both the extremes of hating others, hating Duryodhana, and hating himself. And why was he able to do that? Because he was focusing on his consciousness. You see, we may have hatred for some people, and we may sometimes be angry, we may sometimes be violent. But hatred towards oneself is much more common. In fact, what happens is, it can happen both within materialistic life and in spiritual life. In material life, we may start hating ourselves because we may feel that I couldn't achieve what this person achieved. I couldn't do what this person did. I couldn't gain this much wealth. I talked about earlier money. Money is important, but some people equate their net worth with their self-worth. And then what happens is, I'm not earning as much as this friend, I'm not earning as much as this particular colleague or this particular relative, this particular sibling. That can make them look down upon themselves. That can make them hate themselves. So, if we don't achieve enough, we may start hating ourselves in material life. Even in spiritual life, there are certain standards we are expected to follow. And if we can't follow them, we may start hating ourselves because of that. But both ways, that hatred is incompatible with love. And if we are hating ourselves, we cannot love God. So, inside-out approach means focusing on consciousness means that we purge our consciousness of all negativity, whether it's hatred towards others or hatred towards ourselves. So Yudhisthira, he had the humility to admit to Draupadi and his brothers. He said that at that time when I was gambling, I was obligated to gamble. I had to obey Dhritarashtra and Vidura, so I had to gamble. But I was not obligated to gamble so much. He said, I lost my control at that time. Of course, his intention was still noble. When he lost a lot of wealth, he thought that he was not a gambling addict who just didn't care for anything else and lost everything. He was thinking that, I am the provider of this family. They didn't have a father, so he was the eldest brother. So he said that, I have lost all this wealth. How will I take care of my family? I have to gain it back. He's thinking, just one dice. If it works right, I'll gain it back and then I'll stop. And he kept trying, and he lost everything. So he admitted that I got swept away by that time. I got carried away. But he was not just, he admitted that, he had the humility, but he did not beat himself up for that. Now later on, while he was in the forest, in the Vedic times, sages, they were multifaceted. They knew a lot of things. So the Vishraman was a sage. He was expert at gambling. He wouldn't gamble, but he was expert at gambling. So Yudhisthira took special gambling lessons from this sage. Why? He said, next time if I'm challenged to gamble, I will not be defeated by Shakuni. So he prepared for the future. So it's not just he was focusing on consciousness. When he focused on consciousness, he worked on dealing with practical strategies for dealing with problems also. But the key point here is that because he did this, he was free from hatred towards others, hatred towards himself. He was peaceful. He was even contented. On the other hand, Duryodhana was never contented. So when we practice spiritual life, we may feel, in that same time, I spent to come to a program, I spent to chant some holy names. I could be working for 1 hour, I could be earning this much money. Yes, we could be doing that. That's an achievement. But what we are doing through spirituality is, spiritual practices, we are improving our consciousness. We are enriching our consciousness. And that will ensure our happiness far more than any externals. So when Now, eventually Yudhisthira also becomes a king, and he becomes a powerful king. But his happiness does not depend on his royal opulence. His happiness is already founded from within his heart. And for all of us, I'll conclude with one last point, that when we are talking about what brings happiness, so what does it mean to prioritize consciousness first, relationships later, achievements after third? It does not mean that we neglect achievements, but we recognize that externals can provide happiness only when the internals are there. And that's why we focus on that. So we improve our consciousness by connecting with the divine. We connect with Krishna. He is the source of all purity. When you connect with Krishna, the impure things, the negative things, the self-destructive things within our consciousness get washed away. Just as there's a lot of dirt and garbage in some sewage, and a lot of clean fresh water comes in, and all the garbage gets swept away. So like that, when we open ourselves to Krishna and sound vibration centered on Krishna, Krishna's holy names, Krishna Katha, then our consciousness gets cleansed. And then with that cleansed consciousness, then we can work to build healthy relationships. And then we can work for the achievements that matter for us. And that way we can have a full and fulfilling life. The end of the Bhagavad Gita is Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Patho Dhanudara Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir Dhruvani Tirmatir. He says that wherever there is Krishna and wherever there is Arjuna, there will be victory. So now what does this mean? In one sense we could say that Krishna is God, so he is Lakshmipati. So wherever there is Krishna, there will be victory, isn't it? So why does this verse need to mention Arjuna? Verse says wherever there is Krishna and there is Arjuna, there will be victory. But wherever there is Krishna, there is going to be victory. So why mention Arjuna at all? Because the point of the Gita is not just to proclaim God's position. Or wherever there is God, there will be victory, there will be prosperity. That is not the point of the Gita. The point of the Gita is not to proclaim God's position. The point of the Gita is to transform human disposition. That human disposition means let us align with God. So Arjuna is with Krishna, and therefore Arjuna will be victorious. So for all of us, if we align with Krishna, then sometimes in life there will be success, sometimes there will be not so much success. But the power of devotion is that it decouples happiness from success. I'll conclude this point, that devotion decouples happiness from success. That means devotion makes our happiness independent of our success. We will get success in life, but even if we don't, devotion connects us with a reservoir of inner happiness. And that's how we can be joyful even amidst life's ups and downs. And that is the key to happiness. Not depending on externals for happiness, but connecting with the divine within, and thereby finding lasting endurement, lasting fulfillment. So I'll summarize. I discussed broadly 3 points. We started with the verse that which tastes like poison in the beginning will taste like nectar in the end, and vice versa. And then I talked about this arc. So we saw the diagram. Remember, nectar in the beginning, poison in the end. And in that connection, what does nectar in the beginning mean? Achievements are titillating. They are like nectar in the beginning. But in the pursuit of achievements, if we neglect relationships, we neglect consciousness, then we get a long tail of poison in the end. And with this we discussed with respect to Duryodhana's life story, that he was crazy for the kingdom, and to achieve that kingdom, he started hating the Pandavas, and then he let his consciousness become filled with envy and greed. And because of that, even when he had succeeded, he was in prosperity and Yudhisthira was in poverty, but still he was unhappy. Because envy provides no happiness in itself. Envy requires the other person's unhappiness for happiness. And eventually that led to his self-destruction. In contrast, Yudhisthira, he had to go through a lot of poison. And so we discussed Duryodhana's actions. Duryodhana's emotions are understandable, but his actions are inexcusable. So he let his... Yudhisthira also lost everything. He was a king and he lost everything. But Yudhisthira didn't become hateful. He didn't become angry. he tried to cultivate wisdom, he tried to improve his consciousness. And because he improved his consciousness, he could apologize to Draupadi and his brothers. And that strengthened their bond, their relationship. Although he had made a terrible mistake, that did not rupture their relationship. And eventually, when he achieved the kingdom, he did not depend on that kingdom for happiness. Because he had the internal connection with the divine, the devotion decoupled his happiness from its dependence on success. And that is what the Gita inspires us to do. And to connect with the divine and thereby find happiness irrespective of life's ups and downs. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So are there any questions or comments?
When it comes to this inexcusable actions, not everybody is on the level of Yudhisthira. Right? So if somebody does something that hurts us through their actions, and we are not on the Yudhisthira's level where we are taking it as very positive and then go inside and improve our consciousness.
Yes.
So how to deal with those situations practically in life when somebody hurts and some actions are creating some.
That's true. My point was never to say that just because somebody has hurt us, that means we should only go inside and do nothing outside. It depends on time, place, circumstance. Broadly speaking, we can say that when something terrible happens to us, or especially not just something terrible happens to us, something terrible is done to us by someone, we have broadly three choices: tolerate, mitigate, emigrate. So tolerate means, okay, yeah, this is a bad thing, but I can live with it. I want to focus on something more important in my life. And the Pandavas tolerated. When Bhima was poisoned, when Bhima came back, he had come to know what had happened. He was enraged. Yudhisthira said, let's not talk about this. Right now, we are just new in this family. We come new in this family. We don't want to split the family apart. Let's be watchful. So, I tolerated for a long time. But eventually, when a line was crossed, actually in one sense that line was crossed when he tried to disrobe Draupadi. But when he rejected Krishna, when he tried to arrest Krishna, that was over. He, in one sense, by attempting to arrest Krishna, Duryodhana sealed his deal with death. So at that time, Yudhisthira said, now tolerance can't work. Now we can't tolerate, we have to mitigate. Now why difference? Because Yudhisthira initially saw that, okay, this was an attack on me or my family. That's terrible. But when he saw that he was ready to even attack Krishna, he had no scruples left at all. If such a person were to rule the world, that person would wreak havoc on society. So he saw it as a duty to his citizens. He was also part of the ruling dynasty, but that I have to protect them. So he did not fight the war out of personal vendetta. He fought the war out of social duty. So there's a time to mitigate. And similarly for us, if somebody has hurt us, at a personal level we may say, I can tolerate it. It's been difficult, but I can tolerate it. But if that person has hurt not just us, but that person has hurt many people in the past, and that person may continue hurting others, then sometimes we have to take that stand, we have to mitigate. So, and sometimes we may just decide that we emigrate. I mean, it's a terrible situation, I cannot resolve it, and I don't want to spend my life burning with it, so I'll just move away from here. When Vidura was insulted by Duryodhana, and Dhritarashtra remained silent. So what happened was, Vidura decided, enough is enough. Now the harsh words of our enemies don't hurt us as much as the silence of our friends. So Duryodhana's harsh words didn't drive Vidura away. Yes, they were a part of the cause, but it's Dhritarashtra's silence. He had stayed all that time because he had hoped that Dhritarashtra would have a change of heart. But that didn't happen. So he just emigrated. Even the Pandavas, when they heard that Krishna had departed from the world, at that they also emigrated. So we can choose any of these options. But before we do any of these, whether we tolerate, mitigate, or emigrate, it's important for us to appreciate that this is not just this person doing something to me. This is an arrangement of Krishna for my growth. Now how will I grow? That I have to think, that I have to pray, and I have to act. But it is not just something happening by random chance that I am subjected to the cruelty of someone. There is some higher purpose over here. Whether that higher purpose is served by my tolerating, by my mitigating, by my emigrating, that will vary. But we have to appreciate every situation, that it's not just the world's cruelty or people's wickedness or just arbitrary chance. No, there is some Krishna's purpose working through it. And Vidura saw that. He saw that Duryodhana was speaking those harsh words. That was Mahamaya, the Duryodhana's own greed and envy speaking. But he also saw that this is Yogamaya's arrangement. That now, because he has spoken like this to me, I have a reason to go away. I don't have to fight on the side of Duryodhana. I can go away. So devotees, we see the circumstantial cause of whatever is happening, but we also try to see the transcendental cause. The transcendental cause is ultimately the Lord's arrangement. So what is the arrangement? What is the Lord's arrangement for me? What does the Lord want me to do in this situation? That may require prayer, that may require consultation, that may require some time. But if we don't see the arrangement of the Lord at all, then we will simply react in the modes of passion or ignorance. And we will miss the opportunity. Not only that, we will make things worse. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Maybe this is a follow-up to the Duryodhana knew the weakness of Yudhisthira, that he had that weakness for him. And he found out the weakness, and he knew that he could not defeat the Pandavas in a war, because he knew he would lose. So he manipulated him into this. So in our life there are circumstances and people who try to manipulate us. So how do we deal with this?
Yeah, that's difficult. When people try to manipulate us, see, there is a difference between being how to put it? Being pure or being good and being naive. We should be good, but we can't afford to be naive in the world, because we will be exploited. So if we consider, let's go to another example, is that Sita, when Sita was abducted by Ravana, what happened was, Sita, she acted with service attitude. Oh, this person looks like a sage, I want to serve him. But she was good in that sense, but she also needed to be shrewd. Now I'm alone over here. As Lakshman told me, don't go out of his. And this person, is a sage. If he's really a sage, why can't he wait for some time? I mean, I'm not blaming Sita at all over here. Just saying that why is he so insistent? Sages are supposed to be self-controlled. He said that if you don't give me food right now, I'm so hungry, you will be the cause of a curse befalling on your family. So why would a sage curse just because you're saying, just wait, my husband will come back and will serve you. So she had to be a little shrewd. Just being good is not enough. We need to be shrewd in the world. So what does shrewd mean? It basically means that, just like, what do we mean if we are intelligent, we see beyond Maya. Maya is what? That which is not. So we may think that we are the body, that's what we see. But our identity goes beyond the body to the soul. That is intelligence. So intelligence means to try to see beyond what is visible to what is actual. So that intelligence is required not just at a philosophical level, but that's also required at a practical level, at a relational level. that if somebody is trying to exploit us, then okay, once we may help someone and go along with oblige them, and if they manipulate us and we realize that, then we have to be careful. We have to learn from it. So yes, being shrewd is required. In fact, the philosophical vision, the scriptural wisdom is meant to make us shrewd. That doesn't mean we don't trust people. That doesn't mean we always are trying to look for some ulterior motive in people. But it is not that we are naive. Naive means just not thinking deeply, not thinking seriously, just going along with things at face value. That will not work. So we will be exploited if we are not. Because what happens is there are people who there is weakness and there is wickedness. So weakness means that everybody can have a moment of weakness. That say we invite some guests to our house, and we keep some money lying on somewhere the house, and they see that and they grab it and they go away. And they come to know about it and they say, oh, I was in great need, I'm sorry about it, I'll return it. That's weakness. Everybody can have a moment of weakness. But wickedness is that a person deliberately looks for an opportunity. Like wickedness is like cold-blooded. There are people who exploit it. Oh, I know that you keep things carelessly. So I'll ingratiate myself to you, and then when you lower your guard, I'll just swindle everything away from you. So there are people like that. So with those people, we also need to be firm. Not only we need to not be manipulated, but if somebody tries to exploit us, so forgiveness is good for weakness. If somebody does some mistake out of weakness, forgiveness is required. But forgiveness in the face of weakness is kindness, which is begun. But forgiveness in the face of wickedness is foolishness. It's foolishness. If some terrorist is on a rampage killing people, and the terrorist runs out of bullets, and the police has come and police can shoot him. Oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And the police lowers the gun, and the terrorist takes out a concealed gun and shoots the police. It's like that. So there are people who are wicked, unfortunately, and we not only have to be on guard against them, but sometimes we cannot forgive them. We have to hold them accountable for their actions also. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions? Are you raising your hand or are you scratching your head? Yes, please. Hare Krishna.
First of all, thank you so much for giving us your divine association so that we can learn. I want to ask a question from the perspective of sometimes when we have new people in any organization, so we motivate them, even that could be a false motivation, so that they can stand up on their feet and they can move forward. Is it also part of considered as a wrong if our motive is right?
Let me try to re-articulate the question. That you're saying that sometimes we may, to encourage somebody to do something good, we may give them some false hopes, or not exactly true. We may exaggerate something or something, but we are doing it for a good cause. So is that good, or is that manipulation? Well, broadly, the Mahabharata says that how do we decide what is the right action and wrong action? There are three criteria. There is the content of the action, there is the intent of the action, and there is the consequence of the action. What we are doing, why we are doing, and what is the result of doing it. So all these three factors have to be considered. So in modern ethical theory, there are three broad categories of ethical theories or ethicists. They say those are the categorical ethics is this is right, this is wrong. So they focus only on the content. That's all. So that's categorical ethics. Immanuel Kant, and he was a propagator of the deontology. That's one branch of it. The other is consequentialist ethics. Utilitarianism is an example of that. Okay, the consequence is good, that's wonderful. And the third is what is called as character ethic. Character ethics means that what is the character of the person doing it. So if a person of good character is doing something questionable, then don't immediately presume that it is wrong. Focus not on the specific action, focus on the character of the person. So now none of these theories encompasses the complete reality. Deciding what is right and wrong is difficult. But overall, we can say that what the Mahabharata says, all three are required. We look at the content of the action. Now, there are certain things which are right and certain things which are wrong. So, for example, we can say that speaking truthfully is good, speaking falsely is bad. Well, yes, but is that an absolute thing? If there is a riot going on and our friend is a part of the ethnic community that's being targeted, and that friend knocks at our door, please save me, please hide me. And we hide them in our basement, and now those rioters come and knock at our door. Is he here? No. Should we speak the truth at that time? No, obviously not. Why? Because that's why ethic has become so complicated is that because it's not just one ethic, it's not just one moral value. We need a hierarchy of moral values. Which moral value is higher and which moral value is lower? In this case, we can easily say that, okay, saving the life of someone is more important than speaking the truth. But if somebody is fixated on categorical ethics, what they will think is, speaking the truth is what is the right thing to do. So they don't consider the consequences. But here the consequence, so speaking truth is one value which is based on categorical ethics. But saving a life, that is based on consequentialist ethics. So what is right, what is wrong? It's difficult. Sometimes you have to look at the intent of a person. So if, for example, a doctor decides to perform a risky surgery for a patient, and the doctor's intent is to save the patient, but maybe during the surgery something goes wrong, or maybe the doctor performs the surgery when they don't have sufficient equipment, they don't have the necessary technological support or the medical support, or the support staff or whatever, but they feel if we wait for that, maybe this patient will die. So then the doctor does it to save the patient. But because of some complication, because of the lack of technology or support, the patient dies. So now is the doctor culpable? Well, you could say the doctor did not follow the procedure. That the doctor should have waited for doing the surgery before they got this. Why did they do like this? So then you could say that the person is wrong, but the intent was good. So that character ethics comes in. So it's so in one sense, in real life, it is not so easy to decide. But all three factors have to be considered. And in this case, if we are pushing somebody to do something which is good for them, at that time we exaggerate some things. Well, we live in a world where promotion is required. If people are to do something, things have to be, in one sense, glorified, praised, so that people are attracted to it. Now, how far the promotion can go from the reality, that is something which has to be, which to some extent it may be individually decided also. See, some people, in a sense, everybody has their nature. Some people, it's like when they like something, they will praise it as if it is the greatest. And it's just the way they are. They're effusive in their praise. Like they like something and they will glorify, this is the best in the world. And some other people, they like something also, and I have a friend who works in a company and he says that my boss is, you come up with the most brilliant idea. He says, that's not a bad idea. And he says, that's not a bad idea is we understand the highest praise that can come from this person's mouth. So some people are, each of us is different. So some people just are effusive in praising things. So it could be that person's nature also. So it's not a bad intent, it's not ill-motivated. As you say, it's well-motivated, but it's also natural. So somebody who's never effusively praiseful, who's never effusive in their praise, and suddenly that person starts praising, then you can say there is something, you say something wrong over here, something fishy over here. So in general, we have our nature and we'll act according to our nature. So if that's how we function, others also understand that. So I think we all need to act according to our nature, follow our heart, but that doesn't mean we neglect our judgment. We have to use our judgment skills, but eventually, after we make a judgment, or after we weigh the various factors according to our judgment, sometimes it's not a clear verdict. This is what I should do. There's a time when we need to follow our heart, and that's why if you look at the scriptures, they're often filled with ethical dilemmas. What is the right thing to do? And it's not that God comes in front of the characters and says, okay, this is the right thing to do it. No, they pray, they deliberate, and then they arrive at decisions. So I can say there is a long non-answer to your question. So non-answer in the sense that I can't give a specific answer, but I can give you broad principles by which the decision can be made. Does that answer your question?
So we also have to listen to Paramatma in the heart in one of the decisions.
Yes, of course. That's when we pray, when we contemplate, we are connecting with the Paramatma in our hearts. It's also, of course, good to consult those whom we trust, those who are spiritually minded, because especially those who may be better connected with the Paramatma in their hearts, we talk with them and take their inputs. That's also very helpful. Okay, thank you. So, thank you very much for your participation.
Sorry, one question from
YouTube, okay, sure.
is asking, how do we practice devotion? Uncouples happiness and achievements. We feel naturally happy when we achieve, which serves as impetus for more things. Please advise. If we see our work as service, how does this apply?
Okay, so when I say that devotion decouples happiness from success, but we all naturally feel happy when we achieve some things, and especially if we are seeing our work as a service to Krishna. When we're achieving some things there bring us happiness. Well, when I say decouples, that I didn't at all mean that we don't seek achievements or achievements are unimportant. It's just the hierarchy that is important. So Arjuna was an achiever. Arjuna practiced archery tirelessly and he became the best archer of his times. So it's not that achievement itself is bad. But sukhe dukhe samay krutva labha labho jaya jayo. 520 Krishna says that na praharishet priyam prapya no dvijet prapya cha priyam sthira buddhira sammudho brahmavid brahmani sthitaha. Krishna says what happens is that once we become brahmavid, become aware of the ultimate reality, brahmani sthita, we become connected with Krishna, with the ultimate reality, then we are not elated amidst happiness, nor are we devastated amidst distress. So we are more steady. The idea is not that we don't care for the results of our work. If we are working, we do care. Say now after this program there is prasad. Now the cooks, they will not think that, I'm following Bhagavad Gita, I don't care for the quality of the prasad, I'm detached. No, they want to cook the best they can. Why? Because that's our service to Krishna. So we do try to do our best. But the purpose of a devotee in trying to do the best is not just to achieve some greatness in the world. The purpose of the devotee is twofold. One is to please Krishna. It is Krishna who has given certain abilities, and by using them fully, we please Krishna. And the second is, a devotee's focus is more on contributing to the world than achieving in the world. Loka sangraham evapi sampashyan kartumarhasi. Krishna says that each of us has to play our part in maintaining the order of the world. We say the world is such a big place, what part can I play? Well, we may say I can't play any part in the order of the world, but we can play a big part in the disorder of the world. Each of us can create a lot of trouble if we want to. So we have our roles, and everybody, Krishna says, has to play their role. So a devotee's focus is more on making a contribution, and that contribution leads to achievement. That's wonderful. But if it doesn't, a devotee is not dependent on that for happiness. Certainly, if our contributions are valued, our contributions are appreciated, that brings happiness. But the idea is, I have a whole talk on the principle of work is worship. But the way I summarize that, the Gita is not talking about not caring for achievements or not caring for results. But the Gita is saying that care for something more than the immediate results. And what is that? Ultimately, it's Krishna. So for us, we work so that we work well, so that we please Krishna. So I'll conclude this answer with one example. Suppose there is maybe a billionaire patriarch who has a huge chain of companies across the world, and now he has an heir. He has a son for whom the whole property is meant ultimately. But the father wants to test how responsible is my son. The father tells him, okay, you go in one of my shopping malls, and you act as an attendant over there. You show the wares to people. Now at that time, what is this person trying to do? This is a millionaire's son, but he's right now acting as a salesman. He's a billionaire's son. He's acting as a salesman. Now, as a salesman, he will try his best to make the sale. But sometimes some customers are very demanding, fastidious, and even disagreeable. They look at the whole shop and they'll reject the whole shop and they'll go away in a huff. And then this attendant has to fix all the things, put all the things in place. It can be very annoying. Normally, when a customer comes to a shop, all the attendants want to attend because then they will probably make a sale. It will come fairly in their record. But some customers who are known to be very disagreeable, when they come in, all the attendants go away. That's why there are two kinds of people. Some people bring happiness wherever they go, and some people bring happiness whenever they go. So anyway, so suppose this billionaire son is encountering a person of the second category. He'll try to make a sale naturally, but if he's polite, if he's patient, he knows that this is a test from my father. My father is watching. I'll try my best to make a sale, but even if he doesn't make a sale, his father says, "Hey, you stayed patient. You didn't become rude. You didn't blow up. Although that person was unreasonable, you acted reasonably. You are mature enough to handle my estate." And then the father will reward that son profusely. So the point of the son is not just to make the sale. The point of the son is to please the father. So similarly for us, when we are working, we do want to do the best we can. But our purpose is not just to make an achievement in the world, make a splash in the world by doing our best. If that happens, that's wonderful. We are able to do something worthwhile for Krishna in this world. But even if that doesn't happen, our purpose is to please Krishna. So it's not that achievements are unimportant. In the hierarchy, for a devotee, making one's consciousness spiritualized, connect with Krishna is much more important. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. So I have written a few books. About 20 books, of which the latest 4 are here. So some of the stories that I spoke today, they are from this book. They are described in this book, Relishing Bhagavad Gita. This has about 100 articles which describe how the Bhagavad Gita is actually an expression of love, philosophy that is meant for the reciprocation of love between Krishna and Arjuna. This is Gita explained from a relational perspective. So if you want to understand the bhakti dimension of the Bhagavad Gita, this is a very accessible book. This is Bhagavad Gita Insights. This talks about understanding the Gita from a rational perspective. So for example, how can we be detached and responsible? So if we have to be equipoised in happiness and distress, what will motivate us to work? Those kind of questions are answered in this book. If God controls everything, then how do we have free will? It's also answered here. This is Bhagavad Gita from a rational perspective. This is Bhagavad Gita from a applicational perspective. So how do we stay emotionally balanced? How do we face adversities and grow through them? How can we cultivate more positive and grateful thoughts? How can we be more non-judgmental in our relationships? How can we be sensitive in our speech? There are about 7-8 sections like this in the Gita, 50-60 articles, 365 articles. So you can read one per day. And then there are this is a calendar with 365 quotes. There are, so I took out, I made some statements which say making money is important, but what you're making with money is even more important. Or few statements like that. So there are quotes like this in this. They are all inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. And this is a very non-intrusive way to present spirituality or share with our friends, colleagues, and others. Because people may not want to read a book, but anybody can read a quote, and that can stimulate contemplation or discussion. So all these four are available. So these three are $15 each. This is $25, but together all of it is $60. If you want, I can sign the books also. And while you are having prasadam, I can have the books also. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
So books are on the display on the table. I will be there if you need a copy, 1 or 2 copies. You can give this as a gift to your friends also. It's a wonderful gift for everybody. So please see your friends program. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our hosts, Judy Mataji and Yash Prabhu. Let's give a big round of applause. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you so much for Prabhuji for inviting us and coming here and giving us the solution. Everyone, I would like to thank you all of us to come, especially on the weekdays and took out time out of your busy schedules and still made it here. Thank you so much.
And also, Prabhu will be giving a talk tomorrow at ISKCON Columbus Temple, which is located very close to Ohio State University, right opposite to the medical center. It's on 8th Avenue. The talk starts at 6:30 tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. So please do come tomorrow. Anything else? Any other announcements? So if not, we will move on to the next part of the program, which is honoring the prasadam. So before taking the prasad, we sing a prayer. So we'll do that and then go for the prasad. Mahaprasade Govinde. Mahaprasade Govinde. Nam Brahmani Vaishya.